Imagine living in a city where, over the course of nearly 2 decades, women keep turning up dead in the same neighborhoods, killed in the same way, under eerily similar circumstances. And yet, no single serial killer is ever officially named. No dramatic arrest, no nationally televised confession, no face that becomes the embodiment of evil. Just a pattern, persistent, quiet, and deeply disturbing. Tonight we are examining one of the most controversial and unsettling crime patterns in modern American history, the mystery known as the Chicago Strangler. This story is based on real cases, real victims, and real investigations. And by the end of this video, we will answer the central question: is this case solved, or is it still unsolved? Beginning in the early 2000s, women in certain neighborhoods on the south and west sides of Chicago began disappearing. Many of them were later found dead, their bodies discovered in abandoned buildings, vacant lots, alleyways, trash bins, and neglected properties. The cause of death, again and again, was strangulation. At first glance, each case appeared isolated. Chicago has long struggled with violent crime, and individual homicides, tragic as they are, did not always signal something larger. But as the years passed, the similarities became harder to ignore. The victims were overwhelmingly Black women. Many struggled with substance addiction. Some were engaged in sex work as a means of survival. Many were economically vulnerable. Many were reported missing before their bodies were discovered. And most hauntingly, dozens of them were killed by the same method: strangulation. Between 2001 and 2018, more than 50 women were killed under circumstances so similar that eventually even law enforcement acknowledged a disturbing pattern. The Chicago Police Department publicly confirmed that over 50 murders were being reviewed as part of what they described as a murder cluster. That phrase is important. A cluster suggests similarities, but not definitive proof of a single offender. And that is where the mystery begins to deepen. The term Chicago Strangler was never the official name of a confirmed serial killer. It was a label that emerged from patterns recognized by journalists, community members, and eventually investigators themselves. It was a name given to an unanswered question. To understand why this case remains so controversial, we need to examine what typically defines a serial killer. In criminal profiling, serial offenders usually share consistent victim types, geographic comfort zones, and repeated methods of killing. In Chicago, those elements appear to exist. The victims shared demographic similarities. The killings were geographically concentrated in neighborhoods like Englewood, Auburn Gresham, Roseland, and Chatham. The method, manual strangulation, repeated across case after case. Strangulation is intimate. It requires proximity and control. It is not impulsive in the same way as a shooting. It often suggests deliberation and dominance. These similarities fueled suspicions that perhaps a single individual was operating for years without detection. However, similarity does not equal proof. Over nearly 2 decades, Chicago experienced significant violent crime across various communities. It is possible, investigators have argued, that multiple offenders targeted vulnerable women in similar environments. Abandoned buildings were tragically common in certain neighborhoods due to economic decline and housing crises. These vacant properties created hidden spaces where crimes could occur without immediate detection. When bodies were discovered days later, forensic evidence could be compromised. This environmental reality complicates the narrative. Was there one calculating predator, or were there multiple individuals exploiting the same vulnerabilities within the same communities? The story gained renewed national attention in 2019 when investigative reporting by the Chicago Tribune analyzed the data and highlighted that at least 51 women had been strangled between 2001 and 2018. The report ignited public outrage and forced deeper scrutiny of how the cases had been handled. Critics argued that if dozens of women in affluent neighborhoods had been strangled over nearly 2 decades, the national response might have looked very different. Conversations emerged around race, socioeconomic status, and media visibility. Many advocates pointed to a painful pattern across the United States. Cases involving marginalized women often received less attention and urgency. The Chicago Strangler mystery became not only a question of criminal investigation, but also a broader reflection on whose stories are amplified and whose are overlooked. It is critical to state clearly that some individual murders within this cluster have been solved. In certain cases, suspects were identified through DNA evidence and other investigative work. Arrests were made, convictions were secured, families in those specific cases received a measure of justice. However, no single individual has ever been officially identified as responsible for all, or even most, of the 50-plus murders connected under the Chicago Strangler label. Law enforcement has repeatedly maintained that while some cases share similarities, evidence suggests multiple perpetrators may be responsible. There has been no official declaration that one serial killer committed these crimes. There has been no unified forensic link tying the majority of the murders to one suspect. And this is why the case feels unfinished. Most infamous serial killer cases follow a narrative arc: discovery of a pattern, identification of a suspect, arrest, trial, and closure. The Chicago Strangler has no such arc. Instead, it remains fragmented. Some cases closed, many still open. Patterns acknowledged, but not definitively explained. The ambiguity is unsettling because it leaves two equally disturbing possibilities. If there was one killer, that means someone may have operated undetected for nearly 17 years, targeting vulnerable women with little national scrutiny. If there were multiple killers, it means systemic conditions allowed repeated targeting of the same demographic in the same neighborhoods for nearly 2 decades. For families of the victims, the debate over one killer or many is secondary. What matters is that their loved ones were killed. Behind every statistic was a daughter, a mother, a sister, a friend. Many families describe their loved ones as kind, resilient, and deeply loved, despite struggles with addiction or poverty. Community activists have called for greater transparency, more resources for investigations, and consistent attention to missing and murdered Black women. The emotional toll on communities already facing economic hardship has been profound. So now we arrive at the central question that many viewers are asking: is the Chicago Strangler case solved or unsolved? The honest answer is complex. Individual murders within the cluster have been solved in certain instances, but the overarching theory of a single serial killer, known as the Chicago Strangler, remains officially unconfirmed and unresolved. There is no named individual recognized as the Chicago Strangler. There has been no official announcement declaring that one offender committed the majority of these crimes. Therefore, in terms of the broader mystery, it remains unsolved. As of the mid-2000s, several cases connected to this pattern remain open. Investigators continue to review forensic evidence. Advances in DNA technology may one day clarify connections that were previously undetectable. But until definitive forensic links tie the majority of these murders to one individual, the Chicago Strangler remains a theory grounded in patterns rather than a confirmed identity. This case forces uncomfortable questions. How does society prioritize victims? Does media attention influence urgency? Can systemic inequality create blind spots in investigations? Whether the answer ultimately reveals one killer or many, the tragedy remains the same. More than 50 women lost their lives under eerily similar circumstances in one American city over less than 2 decades. And perhaps the most haunting aspect is the absence of closure. There is no single villain to point to, no courtroom finale to replay. Only a lingering question that echoes through Chicago's south, and west sides. Was there ever truly one Chicago Strangler? Or was the horror something more complex and systemic? If you found this deep dive informative and grounded in real documented facts, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more long-form, carefully researched true crime investigations. Comment below with your perspective. Do you believe this pattern points to one serial killer or multiple offenders operating within the same vulnerable communities? Your thoughts matter, and respectful discussion helps keep these stories alive. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next investigation.